There's a common misconception that I see repeated over and over and over again on Facebook and on radio forums, where someone will ask, what antenna should I use to transmit from inside my car? Now, the correct answer for this is you do not have enough information to answer this question. But the answer that almost invariably happens is that a slew of people will say, you can't do that, your car is a Faraday cage, which can be true in some circumstances, but in many circumstances is just not true at all. Let me give you an example. I read an Amazon review of someone who bought two Uniden CB radios, handheld CB radios, and wanted to use them to talk to his wife in a second car as they went up the highway on vacation. And they went and did that, and he got back home after vacation and proceeded to write a scathing review about Uniden because these radios did not work communicating 30 feet away to his wife in car number 2. That was not the radio's fault. That was his fault. That's user error. You cannot communicate from inside a car to inside another car with CB radio. And the reason for that is it's 11 meters wavelength, and you don't have 11 meters in your car to work with. But there are frequencies like 70 centimeters and GMRS that you can use inside your car easily. It's done all the time. You have seen people go up and down the highway using FRS radios and GMRS radios. We've seen this. It's common sense. You can do that. You can talk car to car on those frequencies. Those frequencies are very close to 70 centimeters, which is an amateur radio frequency where you absolutely can use it to talk car to car, and you can transmit from inside your car to a repeater because it works. It will work. So the correct answer to the person who's asking this question is, hey, what frequency are we talking about here? And if the frequency is 10 meters, well, then the answer is no. Your car is not going to allow you to use 10 meters from inside. But if he says, well, I'm thinking 70 centimeters, well, the answer is yes, you can do it. It really doesn't matter what antenna. Use the antenna it came with. It's 70 centimeters. It's not really going to make that much of a difference from inside your car. So why is this? Here is a picture of a Faraday cage. Now I can tell by looking at this Faraday cage that it's intended for protection up to about 5 gigahertz. So whatever object is in it is protected from RF up to about 5 gigahertz. But if you get much higher than 5 gigahertz, this Faraday cage is not going to protect the object inside of it. The reason is the Faraday cage is only as good as the largest aperture. And so in this Faraday cage, the aperture, or the spaces in the grid, the copper grid, the mesh that you can see, are extremely small, way less than a millimeter. And so anything greater than a millimeter cannot penetrate this cage, but anything smaller than a millimeter can. So there are frequencies that this box cannot protect you from. So this is at the higher end of the radio spectrum. You're probably more familiar, though, with a Faraday cage that you would see at a museum or on Facebook video, YouTube videos, something like this, where you have a person inside a Faraday cage and they're shot with the equivalent of lightning and they're completely safe. And that's what's going on in this picture. But notice that the aperture, or the openings in this mesh, are far larger than they were in the previous cage. Why does it work here, even though the mesh is larger? Well, it depends on what frequency we're trying to get into that cage or out of that cage. Lightning is 3 to 30 kilohertz. And if you do the math on that and convert kilohertz to wavelength, 3 to 30 kilohertz is an enormous wavelength. The aperture in this fence is only 2.5 inches. And so any signal that is greater than 2.5 inches cannot penetrate this shield, but anything less than 2.5 inches can. So how does that apply here? Well, CB is 10 meters. Well, that's greater than 2.5 inches. I can't use that inside this thing. 2 meters? Well, no, that's about 6 feet. I only have 2.5 inches here. So what works? 70 centimeters. Okay, 70 centimeters is about 2 feet 6 inches. Will that penetrate? No, it won't penetrate. That won't work either. Okay, but what about your car? The aperture size in your car is the opening area of your largest window. Now, I don't know of any cars that have 6-foot wide windows, and so 2 meters is probably not going to do real well from inside your car. But would 70 centimeters do well inside my car? course it does, as does GMRS and FRS, because the aperture in our car's windshield is at least 2 feet 6 inches. And at 70 centimeters frequency, we're dealing with a wavelength of 2 foot 6 inches approximately. And many of the windows in your car are at least that wide. The front and the back are that wide, which is why you can go up and down the highway from car number 1 to car number 2 and talk to the car in front of you and the car behind you, because both of those windows are larger than the wavelength that you're using. So the higher the wavelength, the easier it is to get through there. That said, if you keep going up too high in wavelength, like above 5G, windows become a problem. Higher frequencies around 5G have a harder trouble getting through windows, but we're talking about somewhere around 70 centimeters here. So yes, you can talk car to car with amateur radio. If you're using the right frequency, you can talk from inside your car. Now here's why I bring this up. You probably knew this already. So people who make these blanket statements that, no, you can't, your car is a Faraday cage, you can't. You knew that wasn't true, but you said it anyway. So the correct answer to someone who asks a question like that is, well, what are you using? What are we talking about here? You're saying transmitting from your car. What frequency? Because there are frequencies at which that will work, but there are frequencies at which that won't work. I mean, for 10 years I was a technician, and all I had was handheld radios, and I used repeater after repeater on 70 centimeters from my car using my rubber duck antenna. It works fine. And most amateurs know this. But when it comes to people asking questions like this, they seem to draw from a repertoire of blanket answers that they've heard before, and they're just going to repeat because they heard it before, and they're not really running that through the common logic that they should have if they actually pass a technician exam without just memorizing the answers. So that's enough of the rant. I put this out because I feel like we're supposed to help and mentor people or Elmer people who have questions like this so that they're better operators, which makes things easier for us when we're on the air. And I'm just not seeing that. It's frustrating because I'm seeing people just repeat the same garbage over and over, even if they truly know that it's not correct. It's irritating. A couple more facts before we go. Bigfoot is not real. The earth is not flat. And Elvis has indeed left the building. 7-3.